On this week's program, Professor DM crafts a stupid comment. Gary D20 rolls a 1 on 3.5. Kevin keeps moving the goalposts. And I make it almost to a 6-hour finish line just to fumble the ball. That's right, folks. I'm Daniel. This is Driving and Dragons, and you have found your way to yet another episode of Intelligence's Dumpstat. Don't forget to like and share the video with your friends. Hit the like button, then the hype button so that the video gets added up to the trending YouTube videos page. Subscribe to the channel for more content and jump in the always lively comment section to give everyone your thoughts on this week's stupidity. As always, all the revenue for the channel, memberships from Patreon and supers and all that stuff goes directly towards fixing up and ultimately giving away our 1974 Dodge Dart channel project car. Speaking of the Dart, we have a sponsor this week. And that sponsor, well, let's just say I should grab that Vince McMahon higher power clip because, it's me, Austin. It was me all along. That's right. This video is brought to you by my current Kickstarter project, Corvid Codex. Do you like pulp? Do you like fantasy and sci-fi and cyberpunk and sword and sorcery and post-apocalyptic stories? I know you do, because it's basically a prerequisite for being a TTRPG player. The only problem is that we don't have good stories that we can put on our shelves anymore. The big publishers won't print anything that isn't devoid of morality and loaded with bizarre interspecies love triangle smut. And self-publishers? Unfortunately, it is 90% unedited, unrevised slop thrown directly from Microsoft Word into Amazon Publisher or Lulu print-on-demand services. Or worse, it's a Substack filled with poorly revised anime plots written in something that looks kind of like English words, but certainly doesn't read like the actual language. So a group of dedicated, passionate writers and I took matters into our own hands. We have written dozens of short stories, just like the ones that you used to find in the pages of pulp magazines and the fantasy novels of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We revised, we edited again. We hired talented RPG artists to bring these stories to life, and now the first 7 are ready to print and send out. But we need your help to print high-quality, standard paperback books that you can put on your shelf, and to guarantee that we can do it at least 2 more times this year, we need you to go over to Kickstarter right now and pledge your support. For just $5, you can get the hyperlinked and fully formatted PDF edition. For $13, you can get the premium paperback edition along with the PDF. And for $50, you can join the murder and get this volume along with every future edition published in 2026, of which there will be at least 2. And I have even got some cool found feather bookmarks that feature the Corvid Codex logo and the amazing Can You Feel It cover art by Patio Cakes available as an add-on. So head over to Kickstarter, read the excerpts to see if it's the kind of quality writing that you're getting, and help us bring you new stories written the old way. Link is in the pinned comment and the video description, as well as here on the screen. That's enough shilling. On with the show. We open this week with everybody's favorite kindly old Mr. Rogers of the tabletop world, Professor Dungeon Master of Dungeon Craft. Now, Professor DM is generally pretty spot on with his analysis, and his opinions fit his name in that they are very academic in nature. So when Everay Games asked X-users what the definition of an indie game was, I didn't expect Professor DM to miss it like he did. It isn't that his definition didn't make sense. It's that it was just so surface level and ignorant of what people actually mean when they say a game is an indie game that it kind of shocked me. I blame his, well, we'll call it adversarial view of larger corporate entities. He defined indie like this: any game company that isn't publicly traded or owned by a publicly traded company. To further hammer this home, he added that yes, this means that Paizo and Darrington Press are both indie designers. Well, Professor, I'm going to give you an F here. But, well, it's a solid D-. I'm not going to give you an F. It's a D- for sure. Critical Role is by no means an indie outfit. And Paizo sure as hell isn't either. You see, size is only part of the equation when it comes to what is meant by an indie developer to the majority of the gaming public, particularly in the TTRPG space. Paizo may not be publicly traded, but they were founded in 2002 to essentially handle contracts from Wizards of the Coast to produce third-party D&D content. The company was literally formed to publish Dragon Magazine. They only produced Pathfinder because WotC abandoned the OGL for 4th edition. Darrington Press is also on the WotC tit backed by the heavily supported Critical Role franchise and hiring their design team out of the breadlines in Seattle. A pink slip from Wizards of the Coast is essentially an offer letter for these two companies. And let's set those aside and take a look at what indie really means. I'm going to pop in real quick here when we talk about publicly traded. There are AAA game designers that are private corporations that are not public. And nobody is going to call a AAA game an indie game. When people say indie game, they mean the owner, founder, lead designer, and driving force are all generally the same person. They mean the corporate headquarters is a partially furnished room in the designer's basement or a mini storage unit with a P.O. box. I wouldn't put a number of employees on it or a market cap or a value, but once you get to the level that you have a legal team and you are hiring professional designers from other companies as project leads, and you have a writer's room where multiple W-2 employees crank out supplemental material, virtually everyone would agree that you're not indie anymore. We say indie and we think of a guy pulling up to Podunk Con at the West Blockton Middle School gym with a folding table, a handmade sign, and a box of books that he took a personal loan out to publish in his 1996 Dodge Caravan. Professor DM says indie, and he thinks of a company who picks up the cell phone, calls an employee, and says, "Did you make it to Gen Con? Cool. The setup team will be there with 5,000 new copies and a full booth in an hour. Don't forget to keep your receipts for accounting." Looks like Dan must have been working on his Ultimate Dungeon terrain when he posted that definition, because he was clearly huffing paint fumes. Gary D20 made a brains light comment in support of rules light games on X. He posted this meme of a gigantic 2-story library that said this is how he feels playing 3.5 D&D. Hold on, there's a rule for that in one of these books somewhere. He captioned it with "Rules light is where it's at." Of course, this falls into the same trap most people fall into when they try to dunk on 3.5. They base their complaint on a complete misunderstanding of how the system is meant to run. Now, good old Max over at Legion of Myth has the right of it when he has his 3rd edition hate. I believe the way he put it was that he understands that 3.5 is a Lego set and that the DM is supposed to pick the right pieces to build the best game for his campaign. He just doesn't want to have to build his game before he plays it. The point here is, if you are looking at 3.5 and you need to look through dozens of books to find rules, you already failed. 3.5e is not and never was intended to use all the books in the same game. Hell, it isn't even designed to use all the rules in the core books in the same game. It is modular, and it starts hammering that home right in the player's handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide, where half the rules presented have 2 or 3 variants that can be subbed in to tweak the mechanics to enhance a specific style of play. The idea is, if I'm doing like a seafaring pirate campaign, for example, I'm going to get all those detailed rules and alternate skill uses and feat applications and vehicle combat rules and stuff like that to dig into a high seas adventure. But if I'm running a far more traditional land-based game and the players just happen to be traveling by sea, I'm going to have players set rigging with a use rope check, and we're limiting combat more or less to some basic ranged weapon attacks. It's a 3.5 edition Game Master. Has to be able to say no as a complete sentence, including to himself. Gary apparently never learned that lesson, so he's out here pushing for easy RPG is the best game ever, where the only mechanic is you flip a coin. While we're on the topic of rules, I've got a great example of how not to argue on the internet if you don't want to look like a moron. This comes courtesy of one Kevin Billings over on Facebook. Now, the content isn't particularly important, but I'll lay out the TLDR for you. A meme was posted about a player's casually tipping a commoner with a gold coin while conveniently ignoring that an average commoner has probably only seen a gold piece maybe once a year. I actually did the math on this for those who were curious, but in D&D, depending on edition, it ranges anywhere from a $500 tip to a $10,000 tip, depending on edition when you figure out what the daily wage of a commoner is versus the average median income, etc., etc. I mentioned that this is actually one of the strongest supporting arguments for gold for XP, which I mentioned in my Are You Experienced series. That being that it creates a resource sink to keep your PCs from getting outrageously wealthy very quickly. Think about it. You go into a cave, you recover a sack with 150 gold in it as a level 1 party, 5 members, 30 gold apiece. In a couple of days, they just raked in between 15 and 300k each based on that math. Gary knew this. He mentioned it in more than one article about the AD&D gold for XP level mechanics, which require characters to pay for training on top of earning XP to advance. Well, long story short, old Kevin tried to pop in with nowhere in the source books is there any gold for XP mechanic that acts as a sink because it never requires you to spend gold. I disavowed him of this notion with quotes from the DMG and the Rule Cyclopedia and the 2E DMG, and even outlined a few differences in minutia, such as, needing to maintain gold as part of a stronghold maintenance and requiring conversion of goods, etc., etc. And this is where we get on to why he's on this series today. He could not just accept that he was wrong and that you could, in fact, find gold for XP mechanics that include spending gold to level up in the source books. We went through all the favorites. You're cherry-picking quotes and misrepresenting the rule. You told me where it was, but you didn't give me a page number. You haven't posted screenshots from the source book. You mentioned several different source books, so you must be taking pieces from different editions to make one rule. Oh, you said insert complete straw man and outright falsehood easily proven, disproven by scrolling up a little bit. And of course, finally, well, it's stupid and you just don't level up from just getting XP. He isn't here because he's totally wrong. He isn't here because he didn't understand gold for XP mechanics. And he isn't here because he did that ridiculous thing where he tries to be technically right when proven wrong by saying, well, you earn the XP for getting the gold. The spending is separate. It's all part of the same mechanic. He's here because he is a great example of how to dump intelligence due to your ego. When challenged, especially online, but anywhere, you don't have to respond on the spot. It's far more important to be correct than to be fast. If you're going to call something out, make sure you know what you're talking about. If you were wrong either because there was information you didn't have or you were simply mistaken, don't try to warp things to make yourself quote-unquote right. Everyone sees what you were doing, and it only wrecks your credibility moving forward. There's no shame in being wrong. So just adjust your thinking and move on. Hell, if he would have just said, damn, I guess I missed that, and then moved on to why he doesn't like paying for level ups, he'd have found out that I'm in no way a fan of gold for XP, and I feel there are far better ways to accomplish the good that it achieves. But instead, he had to go on the attack and tell me that I need to put down the video games. In a conversation where I was talking about gold for XP and paid training, and he was talking about hit monster, get points, dang, I get more stats. So who's the one who's playing video games on the table here, Kevin? Finally, I am ashamed to admit that I myself belong on the list this week. For 6 hours on New Year's Eve, I streamed live with guests from all over the hobby. Max Liao, Bear, RPG Pundit, Dundermoose from the BroSR, Patty. 6 straight hours of in-depth content, mostly on TTRPGs, but also on AI, on hiring artists, on bad drivers, on cigars, pipes, bourbon, cars, and yeah, even on football. But there was one major purpose of that stream: to promote the midnight launch of the Kickstarter for Corvid Codex. Several authors and both artists involved in the project were in the chat throughout the night. Yeah, we talked about the book. I didn't screw that bad. But what I did do was have Fwutters DM, the author of one of the most unique and fascinating stories in the book, on the stream for about 2 solid hours. And I didn't ask him one question or talk to him for 1 minute about his story. I even referenced it twice in the stream when he wasn't on, and I still forgot to talk to him about it in possibly the most boneheaded thing that I've done on YouTube. Guys, his story is one that we all joked would either land us on the New York Times bestsellers list or would result in our readers holding the book up sideways with a confused look trying to figure out what happened, because it is strange, it is esoteric, it is thought-provoking, and it is about as abstract as they come. Luckily for me, Dundermoose has expressed an interest in talking to some of the writers on his stream, so the BroSR can step up and cover for my mistake. And you can be damned sure that they will be hashtag magnanimous about it all over my comments in X. That's the cross that I'll have to bear for using intelligence as a dump stat. Now, where did I put my BC headache powder?